Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Midgard's Utgard Tactical Folder. We actually have a Midgard's knife that can be manipulated with one hand. Now, there's a lot of confusion surrounding Midgard's a lot of confusion surrounding this knife in particular. I'm going to answer hopefully a whole bunch of questions for people. First of all, thank you so much to Tools for Gents for sending this in. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. I'm not sure if this knife is still available anymore, but for those of you, maybe you came to my channel because you watched my YouTube shorts and you're like, what are those weird, gigantic, ultra thick folding knives that he keeps showing on his YouTube short? Those are, most of the time, they are Midgard's knives. And if you're wondering, where do you get those? There's a number of retailers, but probably the most consistent and the one that, carries the versions of the knives that you don't see anywhere else, it's usually Tools for Gents. So that's where you want to look. Even if this is not available, they do have a whole bunch of other Midgard's knives and will certainly carry future Midgard's products. So I'll link them right down in the description. You guys can take a look. Also, people probably want to know, there's a blue one and a black one, right? Actually, both of them come, I'm sorry, no matter which, if you buy this knife, as far as I understand, you get the blue titanium scales and the black G10 scales, which is pretty cool, actually. That's a nice little bonus. We don't normally get like two sets of scales, and especially with one being titanium. There's a lot of titanium on this, right? Also, Midgard's knives are designed, at least all of them are designed in Germany. A lot of people think that all of their knives are made in Germany. That's not true. A lot of their fixed blades are custom made there in Germany. Most of their folders are actually manufactured in China, and originally it was Concept, I think. I don't know if they have a different OEM now, but this knife, for sure, is manufactured in China. And Midgard's has always been very open with me about that. A lot of people also think that Midgard's knives are made in the United States because there's a Midgard's USA. That's not true. They have a place here in the United States where they can, stock knives and then ship them out and get them to people faster in the USA. And they did that because there's an enormous amount of popularity for their knives here in the USA. I have to imagine that this knife in particular was designed for people who live in the United States because it can be flipped open with one hand. A lot of Midgard's knives are designed to where they require two-handed opening, and that's because of laws in some parts of Europe that prohibit knives that open this way, which is, of course, extremely stupid. But this knife was clearly designed, I have to imagine, for people in the United States. But hopefully that clears up some information. Not made in the USA, not made in Germany, definitely made in China, comes with two scales, right? And is one of the few that can be opened with one hand, which is very cool. For sure. There's a whole bunch of details that I want to share here. So let's go ahead and get started. The overall length, this is a big knife, obviously. The overall length is coming in at 8.75 inches. Blade length is coming in at 3.85. Cutting edge is coming in at about 3.65. Let's go ahead and do some size comparison. Sorry, I wasn't completely prepared. I forgot that this knife roll that has all my size comparison knives was actually off the table. But let's put it up against another large knife, something like the AD10. By the way, all custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against the AD10 and the AD20.5. You can see here the AD10 and the Utgard are similar in presence, I guess. When you turn the knives sideways, though, that's when you find out, holy moly, it makes the AD10 look like a baby knife. Anyways, up against the PM2 and Pair 3, it's still big. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca? It's still very big. Okay, how's the action on this knife? So one thing that's awkward about Midgard's knives in general is they're typically a little bit difficult to manipulate given the nature. And again, that nature's on purpose because of, the people who might want to buy them and the laws in the area, the areas where those people live. But here, no, they were pretty unrestricted with this design, obviously, and they did a pretty good job of it. You can actually reverse flick the knife with this hole here. There's no double clutch. Beautiful. It's like a frame lock with overlays, but very easy to disengage, very easy to flip, and also very easy to front flip. I think the detent is also dialed in pretty well considering it's a huge blade. Now, if you try to push button this, here's what happens. That thing will come around and pinch your finger. That's what's going to happen. You light switch only. Get that finger out of the way, right? Which is fine if you remember to do that. If you try to push button it, which doesn't really work all that well because the flipper tab is pretty low profile back here, and you can't really get enough of a leverage on it to get it to fully flip, you can kind of do that. But if you get your finger out of the way, you're okay, right? This is impressively done. It's the only Midgard's Messer that I've ever handled that actually flips like this. So it's pretty cool. Now, when I say that, I mean for a large knife. This is obviously overdone. It's obviously overbuilt on purpose, right? So most flippers that are designed really, really well are still going to feel better than this. But if you have a fascination with like funny, intentionally overbuilt knives, this it's kind of like the Hephaestus from Maxace in the sense that it's done so well that it actually feels pretty good for such a large knife. Anyways, moving on here, let's do carry profile to emphasize this point. So thickness up against the Spyderco PM2 and Pair 3. If you go here, you're like, oh, that's not so bad, but you have to remember, you have to compare it like with the scales on the outside. So this is a monstrously thick knife. It absolutely is a thick knife. The blade stock is like double the Spyderco PM2. Length and height up against the PM2 and Pair 3. So of all the Midgard's Messer knives, this is probably one of the most pocketable. It is still very big, and you will definitely notice it. Attaching the black G10 scales will reduce the weight a little bit, but it is still a huge knife. And it's not so much the profile, which is big. I mean, it's a big, thick profile, but the weight of it as well. It's not quite as tall as the PM2 or Pair 3, but it doesn't really matter. It's every time I put this in my pocket, I was like, oh yeah, that's definitely, like I was aware that it was in my pocket all the time. Let's go ahead and weigh it so you guys know exactly what we're dealing with here. With the titanium scales, you're looking at 9.3 ounces. Removing these titanium scales will remove half an ounce of weight at best. Probably not, though. It's probably still going to weigh about 9 ounces. Now, I don't know about you, but when a knife gets over 6 ounces for me, that's when it becomes exponentially more noticeable. I'm not saying I'll never carry a knife that's that big. I'm saying, like, for me, the scale goes, if it's under 3 ounces, I literally don't care. The difference between a 1.5 ounce knife and a 2.9 ounce knife is negligible. I don't notice it. I just consider it ultra lightweight. I'll forget it's there a lot of times. In between 3 ounces and 6 ounces is kind of, like I'll carry it, and obviously feels a little bit heavier. Once you get over 6 ounces, it really just becomes exponentially heavier. And it's also a little bit butt heavy. I mean, it's just a big, thick, heavy object. The vast majority of people who carry a pocket knife will consider this to be a large pocket knife that is a little bit cumbersome, right? You'll always have the 0.001% of people who are like, well, you gotta be really manly and masculine like me and get used to carrying a big old burly knife. It's just an opportunity for them to type up a paragraph in the YouTube comment section about how manly they are because they carry larger knives. Shut up. Nobody cares. But for the most part, this is going to feel like a heavy object, and you are going to have to dedicate to it. If you like to carry stuff like this, I think that's perfectly fine, right? Because it's fun. You don't have to. This does not have to serve a purpose in your day-to-day life for you to be able to carry it. As long as it's legal to carry and you enjoy it, then you can carry it. But you're going to notice it. You're going to have to dedicate to it. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness, because it is seriously, it's gigantic. Very, very thick. So for reference, cold steel SRK is about 1/5 of an inch, right? 190 thousandths or so, 195 thousandths. The Medford Praetorian tie is about 1/4 inch thick, right? That's usually those are usually knives that people reference in terms of like thickness. So on that scale, it's way thicker than the cold steel SRK and almost as thick as the Medford Praetorian tie at 233 thousandths. Literally almost exactly as thick. This is extremely thick. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use in this channel. I don't believe these are Torx. I think these are actually, I know that the pivot is, but looking at these body screws, if it is a Torx, it's definitely not a T20. I thought maybe, but no. Probably if it is a Torx, it's going to be T15. And yeah, you can get them in there. Maybe it might just be a hex-looking Torx. In any case, Allen key, hex head, or Torx, you can remove these scales pretty easily. You're going to need a pretty big Allen key to get at that pivot, but you can do it. I wish that the pivot was a little bit deeper. I don't like hex heads. And I really don't like shallow hex heads. This is large and you should have plenty of room, but there's such a small lip. You can slide off of there. When we do a pivot like this, the head's got to be deeper, right? Go ahead and make the whole head just as tall as the scale and then just, round it off or whatever. It's already got ridiculous dimensions. There's no way that that's going to be the line for anybody. Well, I can deal with the thickness of the scales and the heft of the blade and all of that, but boy, if you bring that head up to the same height as the scale in order to allow for some depth, nope, that's a deal breaker. Absolutely nobody, right? So I don't like that it's such a shallow head there, but you can get in there if you need to, and honestly, the construction's very simple. You're going to have a couple more screws underneath this scale here to hold into the backspacer, and the pocket clip should be reversible, but it isn't. You can see how this mounts specifically for right-handed people. All they had to do was just cut that shelf out over here, but they just didn't do it. So, okay. But as far as disassembly, if you have an Allen key and you hold it straight and keep it there, you should be able to take this apart. It's probably both sides, right? It's very unlikely that's a captive pivot in there. It looks like it, isn't going to be captive. So you got to be careful, right? Not only is it shallow, but you probably have to put a key in both sides, which is kind of annoying. This probably should have just been like a T20, but it does look cool, and you are able to take it apart if you need to. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Is that it? Yeah, I think so. Let's go ahead and talk about the meat and potatoes here. I do, as somebody who is just like every other person on this planet, able to identify a utilitarian, reasonably sized pocket knife. Like when it comes to utility, good geometry, a decent size, right? Just like a normal everyday pocket knife, right? I have tons of examples out here. Yeah, for sure. I've reviewed thousands of knives on this channel. And identifying utility is very easy. I think the average person can do it. It doesn't take a special person. Being that type of person, I still love like designs like this that are just over the top on purpose. They're just ridiculous. There's something about a big, thick knife like this that is just funny. It's interesting. And everybody who I ever share my collection with here in town, they come over and take a look at this stuff. They always stop, whether they love it or hate it, they always stop on these big, crazy Midgard's Messer knives because they're just fun, right? This one in particular is extra fun because not only am I actually able to manipulate it with one hand, but it's actually a pretty cool looking knife. It's a really good looking, it's got classic knife lines, but still very Midgard's Messery. Very aggressive. And honestly, it's probably, like I said, it's the most wieldy, the most pocketable, the most, honestly, it's one of the better ergonomic designs they've done. Now, the pocket clip which is shaped like Thor's hammer, is absolutely a hot spot. Absolutely. There's a number of things about this knife that would make it extremely uncomfortable to use for long periods of time, right? But again, as far as Midgard's Messer knives go, it's not bad. So hopefully that you guys understand what I'm saying. If the parameters are Midgard's Messer knives, this is one of their best. Aesthetically, and as far as like being able to carry and use it, it's shaped much more like a traditional knife than a lot of their other stuff, right? Versus like the Viking or the Beowulf. Holy moly. Those are super cool, but not nearly as wieldy. Can use this one. It also has the extra stop pin, which a lot of Midgard's Messer knives come with, right? So you're locking it out with a super thick, like I guess we call this a liner lock. It's a super thick liner lock, pretty typical frame lock, but you can also double lock it out with a stop pin. This makes it to where the knife is not going to disengage, even if the liner lock is moved over, right? It's never going to disengage unless you're doing something extremely stupid with it. So yeah, you're good to go. But then again, like what circumstances call for that much durability with a folding knife? Basically none, right? It's just fun. I do like the blasting on this. I actually think it looks really good. I think the knife would look great with the G10 scales. I think it also looks great with the blue titanium scales. I love the diamond texturing on there. Love the blade. It's a bit of a tanto. The edge is super thick. Super thick. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't slice. There's no shortage of YouTube channels out there who will, I guess, try to display some like superior sense of cutting geometry by taking a really thick blade and demonstrating that it's, look at this, guys. Guys, look at this. It just can't even cut. We can't even cut with this, right? Well, yeah, but if you hold the knife like a person and not an animal, then yes, it absolutely can slice. Does it slice well? No, absolutely not. But can you slice paper with it? Yes, absolutely. If you use the knife as a knife, which, as you can see there, it's not going to bite the same way that a blade with a thinner cutting geometry does, right? Now this probably, actually no, the Ritterhogue is still going good. You can see the difference between these cuts here. This is almost a tear. While we do have curlicues here, you can see the edges lifting up, and that's the result of cutting something like paper with a super thick apex versus the Ritterhogue, which has actually been used for years and definitely needs to be resharpened, right? The bigger problem is when you try to process something like wood or rope or rubber or thick styrofoam or cardboard with a knife like this. Because it's not just the edge that's going through it, it's the entire piece of steel, like the whole thickness of it. So it slows you way down, right? The vast majority of the time, a pocket knife, when I say vast majority, I mean 99.99999% of the time, you are not chopping with a pocket knife. You shouldn't be prying or screwing with a pocket knife, right? But some people go by grandpa's rules. And sorry, your grandpa was wrong. These folding knives are cutting tools. We should be cutting with them, right? A lot of people think that people fight with folding knives. That's cartoon nonsense and movie nonsense. It's just not true. It's very, very rare that somebody does anything offensively or defensively with a pocket knife. These are cutting tools, right? So if you're using it the way that it's intended, a blade that's this thick and this robust is really just hindering the user. Which brings me back to my original point that Midgard's Messer knows this and just doesn't care because it's fun, right? And everybody who's buying this stuff also knows that. It's just fun. And considering it will still perform your basic everyday knife tasks, it just not nearly as well as something like a Rat 2 or an Opinel, right? It's just fun for people who want to carry stuff like this for no reason other than just the fact that it puts a smile on their face, and I think that's perfectly fine. That's why I periodically carry stuff like this. I can open a package with it. I can do my regular, my day-to-day stuff, open packages, right? Cut some tape or, I don't know, little things. Cut a toy out of a container for one of my kids at a birthday party or something. I mean, that's what I'm using a knife for. It'll do that. it'll just do it a lot slower and not nearly as conveniently, right? That's just what it's going to be. But for the big, crazy, clunky, inconvenient, ridiculous object that it is, it's a very nice, clunky, ridiculous, encumbering object. We have the Midgard's Messer logo, and unfortunately, still CPMD2. Now, at this geometry, the truth is it doesn't really matter that much in terms of what it's capable of, how it's capable of performing, because the geometry is so thick that almost it's not really like any blade steel composition is not really gonna it's not gonna you're not gonna notice much of a difference because it's all gonna feel like a big stupid wedge being driven through whatever you're cutting. But the enthusiast collector in me, I just can't stand to see CPM D2 at this price point. Now, CPM D2 is not the same thing as regular D2. CPM D2 is manufactured by Crucible here in the United States and factually is actually an expensive composition. We find regular D2 on sub $50 knives. We also find 8CR13 MOV on sub $50 knives. Does that mean that 8CR13 MOV is a steel that costs about the same as CPM D2? No, not at all. In fact, I think to a lot of people's surprise, CPM D2 is super expensive. But it only performs marginally better than D2, which isn't really all that great, especially when we're comparing to other knives that are at the same price point. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I would like a more premium steel. Why? So I can feel good about my purchase. Not because it's really going to make all that much more difference, at the end of the day in terms of performance. I just want to feel better about the money I'm spending on this, right? Let's be honest. That's what it's about. I agree with anybody who would say that, but a lot of people, I don't think they stop and think like, do I want a better, a lot of people say, well, for that price, it should be S90V. You think S90V at this geometry is going to perform a whole lot like noticeably different? And the answer is no. I mean, it might hold that super thick edge longer, but are you benefiting from that? Not really, right? There's just no specific situation where this thick of a blade holding an edge as long as S90V is really adding any benefit, right? Better geometry, a thinner geometry, right? Well, it's same steel, even a less, you could take 7CR, you could take 3CR13 MOV and bring it down to a super duper thin geometry and it will outperform this by miles. Even if this was made out of S90V at 63 Rockwell, it will absolutely outperform it. The geometry matters that much, right? So I don't know if I really want to get into the weeds of this. I'm just used to seeing the responses to knives like this. I wish maybe that they would just change it to something like S35VN, if for no other reason than just to cool the flames of the people who get upset about CPMD2. I think that people would just accept that now, and I think it would just be better all the way around. But okay, backspacer is literally the entire. It's just like the tang of the blade just like continues into the backspacer, and we have jimping. With jimping and jimping, followed by some jimping and some jimping and some texturing. And there's also, on this side, you'll notice we have jimping, jimping, and jimping. So, yeah, you're not going to drop this. It's basically stuck to your hand. We have a lanyard hole, great. And like I said, the pocket clip is definitely a hot spot. Really cool, though. It's Thor's hammer. That's neat. Truthfully, in and out of the pocket, it really, you would think that it would be super grabby, and it is kind of, but not nearly as much as I thought. Obviously not designed for maximum comfort or ergonomics, but it does look cool. You got to hand it to them. They know how to make an on-theme knife. Like this is, it looks like it's supposed to be a movie Viking tool from the future, right? Something that Thor might actually carry in the movie Ragnarok. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. It's intentionally ridiculous. How much is it, or how much was it when it was available? Because, again, I don't know. And, by the way, no double clutch, very smooth, really nice detent, honestly. Look at this. Really great. No detent lash. Lockup is completely and totally solid, even without the pin, which you don't need, right? No pivot lash, anything like that. Really good. If you plan to use it, if you plan to actually carry and use it, yeah, it'll hold up, definitely. How much is it? Or how much was it when it was available? 350 bucks? I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm not super upset about that, right? If value equates perfectly to performance for you, then obviously this is not going to be worth $350 to you. If you reduce the value strictly to materials, the CPMD2 is going to bother you. However, if you're like me and you use a combination of those elements, but you also consider the amount of work that went into it and country of origin, right? The complexity of things, finish work, tolerances, all of that. And then it starts to be a little, and if you like big, chunky, silly knives, right? And you're familiar with this territory. This is actually on the less expensive side versus, I mean, like, I think the best priced overbuilt knife out there is the Miguron Arma. It's like $300, right? That's you could reduce it to just materials, right? And still you compare it to other like overbuilt knives, and sure, because I mean comparing apples to apples is not just comparing it to some CPMD2 and titanium knife that you found on Amazon. It's obviously not going to be the same thing. This has got 3 or 4 blades in the one blade, right? This is obviously in a totally different territory. You're also getting 2 sets of scales. And it is a very capable object. It's just all the skill points are in durability, and you just really don't need that much, right? If you like overbuilt knives and you like Midgard's Messer knives, this is probably one of the best, one of the most interesting and one of the most wieldy, usable Midgard's Messers out there. And it just happens to be not the worst price in the whole world for what it is. If you don't like Midgard's Messer knives, if you don't like big, thick, heavy knives, you don't like expensive knives, and you just, for some reason, absolutely hate CPMD2, this is not for you. This knife is for very few people, but for the people it's for, they will find absolute love and joy in it. I love this knife. This is actually one of my favorite Midgard's Messer knives. This might be kind of a hard review to follow because I'm trying to review it as a knife, but at the same time, like, I'm trying to be objective about the knife, and at the same time, let my joy for big overbuilt knives kind of shine through. It's really cool. If this is for you, if you look at this and you know for a fact, like I'm all about that, you will love this knife. It will bring you so much happiness, right? If you're not sure, or you definitely don't like how it looks, you don't like the big, thick stuff, yeah, obviously not going to be for you. So, not a recommendable knife in a general sense, though, because it's just absolutely absurd, and it's also pretty expensive. $350, that's a lot of money, right? But still fun. And honestly, as a huge fan of Midgard's Messer knives, this being, one of, if not my very favorite Midgard's Messer knives, yeah, it's going to go on my favorite knives of all time playlist. But it is not recommendable as a tool. I hope that's clear. So anyways, that's going to be pretty much it today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.